Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. Alhamdulillah, it's the end of June as well now. It's 30th of June, and we are nearly at the end of the month of June. And we are going to be adding the seventh month of the year. July is going to really start soon. And I think since the beginning of 2020, it's been a very different year. It's been very interesting in the way that the events of the year have been massively dictated by obviously the rise of the coronavirus situation that we've had. Initially, the first cases were reported back in November in Wuhan, in China. And then obviously the virus picked up speed in January on a wider scale. And then February, March saw the worst cases to arise and then started to build up the numbers during April, May period, with June becoming somewhat of a in-between period since the beginning of the coronavirus situation. And again, Walaikum assalam, Idris Saab is online. Jazakallah khair for joining. Good to see you, mashallah. Abdul Rashid Saab is online. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakat. Baziqa Jahanzeb Saab is online as well. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakat. So again, I think many things have been dominated by the coronavirus situation this year. But even within the situation that is happening around coronavirus, there's quite a lot happening across the world in other domains as well. And I think I was looking through some of the updates from the website on BBC World, as you might have seen. And obviously, coronavirus is still the key thing that is happening from a news perspective. People are really worried about what the situation might be once we are through the coronavirus situation. And how things are going to progress across the world in different domains. But I think some of the other things that are really creating some news stories and noise around the world include obviously the situation in Hong Kong. I think we've discussed the situation in Hong Kong for some time before on how China is effectively imposing all their controls in China now. And I think one of the recent new posts, as you can see on the screen, that now they've announced that anyone who's going to break the security law in Hong Kong is now going to be imprisoned for life. That is obviously a new thing that is coming in from China into Hong Kong. On the travel front, I think this is interesting, and European Union is actually allowing all the people to travel back in from a number of different countries, 15 safe countries, as they've called. I think many of you who are from Pakistan might have seen the announcement that the European Union has banned the entry of PIA, Pakistan International Airlines, into the European airspace. So PIA won't be flying here for 6 months at least. But all the other countries, well, other airlines and other countries are slowly getting back to normal. And excluding Australia and Japan and Canada, Australia and Canada and Japan are included, excluding US and Brazil at the moment, European Union will start flying people back in. So anyone who's here from the US, you probably still have to wait a bit longer in that sense. But otherwise, the flights are opening up. And again, I think there are things around, obviously, many of you might have heard about the issues between China and India. And one of the measures that the Indian government have taken on is that they've banned TikTok, a very popular content video platform in India. So they said that it is a Chinese application, so it will be banned in India now. And there are hundreds and thousands of users in India. So it is going to be interesting on how they are going to tackle that situation in India now with the TikTok ban. I think one other major thing, and many of you might be hearing and reading about this a lot in the news, is that Israel has announced that it is going to pretty much annex and take over many parts of the West Bank. So as many of you might be aware that the conflict between Israel and the Arab states, and obviously with the Palestinian states that were originally obviously Palestinian states, but were pretty much taken over by Israel. That's been going on since 1947. But recently, as you might be able to see it on the map as well, that the plans have been announced by Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, that there are going to be a number of areas within West Bank as you might see, that West Bank is probably the larger part of Palestine as it is known now. It is originally, obviously, I think many of you might be aware that Palestine was pretty much what it is, Israel at this moment, but it has been decreasing in size for a while. And now it is limited to this area, which is known as the West Bank, and then the other strip that is known as Gaza. On the map, you can see it further down, which is nearer to the sea, open to the sea. So even in the areas of West Bank, and especially around Jerusalem, Beit Laham, as it is known, or Beit al-Maqdis, as we know it, is obviously within the confines of the city. And then all the other areas that are surrounding Jerusalem as well. So Israel has basically announced that they are going to try and build a number of these areas where they have existing Israeli settlements, which, as per the international law, this is obviously disputed territory, and there's a ceasefire line, and there are all controls in place. But Israel has openly announced that they are going to pretty much take over this land. So what they are going to do is pretty much unilaterally proclaim its sovereignty over the territory in West Bank. It is obviously forbidden by international law, as I think you can read that Russia pretty much annexed part of Crimea back in 2014. But it is yet to be seen on what will actually happen if this thing that Netanyahu has announced will go ahead, or if it goes ahead, and then it becomes officially part of Israel. It is by all any practical means. I think many of you might be aware that these areas are pretty much still dominated by Israel. As you can see, that Israel is pretty much where all the activity is based around in the West Bank area. But now they've properly announced that they are going to take over the whole area and make it official part of Israel as well. So it is an interesting scenario in Middle East. And since the creation of Israel, that's been an ongoing struggle for the Palestinians for their struggle of a homeland. But it is obviously becoming a major challenge and a major issue as well. Also, I think in Pakistan, many of you might have seen that there was, again, an unfortunate attack on the stock exchange. It was led by 4 people who stormed the building. And I think with the measures and the bravery of the security forces at the stock exchange, they were able to stop the major losses that probably might have happened in case that we might have seen a major issue in the area as well. And I think in other news, probably on the good news side, is that Alhambra, the famous tourist destination in Spain, is reopening. So it is going to be interesting to see once Spain starts to reopen its borders on how people are going to come back into Spain as well. So I think it is going to be, and you can see on your screen as well, some of the videos that are coming in from Alhambra Palace, Alhambra as it is known by us in Spain. So it is being reopened. People can start visiting Alhambra again. People would be able to travel to Spain. They will be able to go to Granada, as it is known, Granada nowadays. And obviously with Alhambra opening again, it is going to be a major tourist destination for people who are willing to travel to Spain after the coronavirus impact. Many of you might be aware of it. Alhambra is the famous palace that for about 700 odd years, when Muslims were obviously ruling Spain, it was the place where many of the caliphates of the Andalus and the Spanish era were based in. Many of the sultans and the kings were based in here as well. And now it is a major tourist destination. More than 2.5 million people, I think 2.1 million, if I remember it correctly, is the number of people who visit Alhambra every year. And now it is going to be reopening again for the people after quite some time. So I think this is obviously a sign that things are improving. It is obviously a sign that things are returning back to normal to some degree, not completely normal, obviously, but they are returning to normality of some degree, at least in Spain and Italy, and some of the worst hit areas in Europe as well. So it is again an interesting element to see that things are improving overall, and we again hope and pray from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that things continue to improve, things continue to ease out, and we see return to normality to a certain degree as we haven't seen for a while in Europe, in UK, and for the rest of the world as well. So with more time, I think we are going to see more changes happening in UK, happening in Europe, and happening all across the world as well, but slowly, not probably at the very earliest. I think in UK, it's been interesting that many of you might be aware of it, that from 4th of July, most of the restrictions that we've had during the severe lockdown as we've had are going to be lifted. But again, I think it is, as they are calling it, as the smart lockdown now. That is the approach that is being taken up by UK. And Leicester was one of the areas where another flare of cases was turning up. So more than 10% of the overall new cases in the whole of United Kingdom were actually just happening in Leicester. It's a city of about 330,000 people in Leicester. So the government has announced that it will impose a lockdown just in Leicester again. So everything else in the whole of UK will be open, but nobody would be able to travel into Leicester or travel out of Leicester for at least next 4 weeks again, because the government has decided that it is a high risk area and there needs to be a proper lockdown. So all the shops again will be closed, all the cafes, restaurants, and everything else that were originally announced that are going to be opened are going to be closed again. So we are going to see the return of this lockdown as we haven't seen since the beginning of March, for example, in UK. So let's hope and pray that things do improve to a certain degree. And I think the lockdowns that we are looking at are still effective in many areas of the world. In US especially, I think many of you might be well aware that in United States, the number of cases seems to be growing again. I think the chief medical officer of the CDC, the Center for the Diseases Control, as it is known in US, Anthony Fauci, he's one of the known doctors in the world. He's predicting that if they are not able to control or impose a stricter regulatory scheme in US, they might see 100,000 new cases in the next few weeks. So it is going to be a difficult decision on how people are going to be able to tackle all the situation across the world. And I think one interesting news, I was again reading some of the high level stuff that's happening in the world. And this thing caught my eye, and many of you might be aware that in a way we have to thank Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and really think about it on how, in any essence, lucky we are with the availability of resources and all the other stuff that is available to us, that in a way are not easily accessible in any way or form for other people. And especially if you think about it, I was reading about Burundi is one of the countries in Africa, and since the beginning of the coronavirus situation, Burundi has been suffering with a shortage of soap. And believe it or not, that the government has now announced that they will be reducing the prices of soap by 50%, and everyone will get the soap at a 50% price, and the rest of the 50% margin will be taken up by the government, and the government will be paying for it. And also, I think there have been issues, and as you can see probably in the news story as well, that there have been stories of soap being smuggled into the country because it is such in high demand and it's not easily available that people are actually smuggling soap into Burundi as well. So it's interesting, and I think the other thing is that they probably don't have access to clean water as well. So the president has announced that the water prices will be significant. Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. Alhamdulillah, it's the end of June as well now. It's 30th of June, and we are nearly at the